And welcome back. Just like that, it is a lovely Wednesday morning out, and we're getting things started with a conversation with reps from the Belize National Teachers Union. It is an update, actually. In with us to talk to us about it is the president of the Belize National Teachers Union, Senator Elena Smith. I like that. And of course, Luke Palacio, who is the first vice president of the Belize National Teachers Union. I'd like to wish you guys a very pleasant morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
So, we've been hearing about this for a long time, and we know that the Belize National Teachers Union is is the largest union, and of course, they said teachers got your back, and the green shirt says it all. Mm-hmm. I would like for us to start as to, before the update, what situation we were before we had to get into a meeting with the Minister of Education. What prompted this situation?
Okay, if you would recall, in December we had a meeting with the ministry, and they presented some proposed amendments to the education rules. Those were 3 amendments: vacation, contracts, and emergency hiring. At that initial meeting, we were discussing those. We had several issues that we raised with them. As a matter of fact, from September, August actually, when this matter of the renewal came into being, and teachers had to sign contracts, we had been back and forth with them, emailing, sharing with them our concerns, trying to get them to resolve some of those matters before we actually got to the point of signing those contracts. We didn't get any headway there, and we were just back and forth. And then we had the matter of the Christmas vacation. The memo went out, teachers were given the additional week, and then we were informed that due to that memo, that would have made that legal. Yes. So for that reason, the amendments came into being. So the amendments would have been then to address the matter of the 3 weeks Christmas break. And it contained the contracts, and then it contained emergency hiring. So 3 things in one. That didn't go through because the amendment, the SI was to be signed before the end of the school year. Well, not school year, sorry, the end of the year, December. And that didn't happen. And so we kept asking for the amendments, and we could not get them until this point, only to find out that they can't share anything with us if there's nothing. So we had this meeting to discuss these matters, and there was no draft or final draft of the amendment to present to us.
Yeah. It all started with a Christmas that landed on Wednesday. That's the strangest thing that led to what was the shift in the Ministry of Education deciding that you would get the 3 weeks, as is the custom in Belize, and needing to amend the regulations to allow for such. Now, you clearly mentioned there were 3 things, and there were sticking points with each one. The contracts, the establishment of the school calendar and who does it and how it's done, and also looking at the emergency posts.
Right.
When we hear the back and forth that was taking place, it seemed the most prominent issue was looking at the school calendar. And from the ministry's perspective, what they were saying is, or what the impression was, is that the teachers are trying to get out of fulfilling this 180-day obligation. Is that the sense that you were getting? Is that a part of the contention there?
Well, Marlene and John, good morning, and good morning, Belize. Basically, this matter is where we've said to the ministry, and they have acknowledged to a certain extent, that they were the ones who were at fault. The education rules, as it relates to the vacation periods, are clearly stipulated in our handbook of policies for school services that came into being in 2000. That portion of that rule was never amended in the SI for the 2011 or 2012 amendment rules. Yeah. So that was not amended. All the ministry needed to do was to say, this is the rule, and we are abiding by the rule.
And to be specific, what rule?
The rule that says when the Christmas falls on a Wednesday or later, then you would get 2 weeks vacation.
132.4.
We insisted, or we said yes, but we are accustomed to 3 weeks. And I said to them yesterday in the meeting that if they had indicated and made it known, this is the rule, all we are simply doing is abiding by the rules. But they decided, okay, you want 3 weeks? We're going to give you 3 weeks, but we are going to make this amendment, which we have not supported. We are not supporting. And because what that would have done is that there would be total chaos and uncertainty as to when our vacation periods would start.
So the context for this is that it's been tradition that you always get 3 weeks,
Yes.
even though there are clear guidelines in the education rules that say if it's Thursday, Friday, or later in the week, it's 2 weeks, and if it's earlier, then it's 3 weeks.
Yes.
But when it falls middle of the week, that's where there were some subjectivity there.
Well, not necessarily subjectivity. The subjectivity would have come in when the ministry decided at this time, with some knee-jerk reaction, that we are going to implement the rule. This government has been in power for the past 12 years, and this would have been the first year that they decided they are going to implement that. So it's a knee-jerk reaction, and so that it could have been to enable them to decide now, the chief education officer will have all the power to determine when the vacation period will be held, and that you are going to ensure that we are going to have 180 school days every year. We pointed out to them yesterday that if we look at the agreement that BNTU negotiated many years ago, from a 40-week school year to a 38-week school year, that still gives you 190 days. If you multiply the 38 times 5. Good? So we have 190 days within that period. Now, if the ministry has allowed, through negotiations, for organizations, managements, and union to be given days to hold activities for their membership, which would then be considered non-school days, then that would still not take away, because I'm almost certain that we don't have 10 such days. And we believe at the union, when we would have negotiated a benefit for our members, that we are not going to let it go so easily. If conditions change that merits such a change, then fine, we may be able to agree through negotiations that yes, the conditions have changed, and so therefore we will accept certain changes. But because one of the points they are coming with is that teachers in the rural areas are given time off to collect their salaries. That was never dependent or based on any road condition or improvements to the communities. The fact remains that all of these teachers must come to the center, the metropolis, the town, to do their business transactions on payday. And so now, because okay, this road is now paved, then you must get less time. It cannot be. The distance is still the same. So those type of arguments we need to defend.
And that brings a lot of clarity into the issue, because there are two things. I mean, the education rules has as it is before this issue, had it very clearly stipulated when the Easter break is. It looks at when the school year would start, end, and the Christmas break. And what the proposed change was going to be was that the chief education officer, in this case, Dr. Carol Babb, would decide on an annual basis all of these start dates, end dates, holiday breaks. And this was an issue for you. Can you explain why?
Because, Marlene, one person would be determining how you, as you said, how you set the school year, how that calendar would be. But it's not just the fact that one person would be doing it. It's also that our school years or school calendar would not be consistent. And so you wouldn't know from year to year whether we are going to start on September 5th or September 6th or the second week in September, we're going to end in. So that would have posed some problems, because schools plan around these things. Parents plan around them as well. And people plan ahead of time. And so those then inconsistencies would create issues for parents, for schools, for teachers as well. But more so for our students and our parents.
And what is the justification? Because I think that's a valid argument in looking at just knowing ahead of time that I can look at this date, and based on the education rules, that should be the start date, that should be the end date, rather than waiting for an announcement by one individual. What was their argument as to why this was the better option?
I don't know that it was an option. It was a decision that they made under the guise that they could now institute this 180 contact days for students and teachers. And the only way they could have done that is to say, well, because in this 38-week period, BNTU has so many days for meetings. Managements have so many days to do, in fact, I think it's 3 days for management that is stipulated. And then if the ministry or if anybody else decides we need to declare a non-school day for so and so, then you'll be able to make it up this way. Because then the school year would not be set in accordance with those vacation periods as stipulated in Rule 132 in the 2000 rules. So that was the bottom line. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to have a window where they could have ensured that 180 days is had, but you can still enjoy some of these things and your vacation period will become.
Was there any consideration for the fact, because what you said before is also important. We know when the unions negotiated, so I mean, you guys play hardball. That's just what people expect from you. So when you came to that agreement of 38 weeks the first time around, if you were to shift the education rules to say that the chief education officer would decide the calendar, they would still need to abide by what the previous agreement was of 38 weeks.
But that doesn't seem to have been the intention there, because they were not paying any attention. You see, when they made that amendment, if you look at the proposed amendment, they were saying that they are going to amend that Rule 132, which then would mean it's at the whim and fancy of the chief. It is not that they were saying, okay, we're going to keep 132, but so and so. It's saying, no, we're going to rescind, we're going to
the entire
replace that entire rule. And then the chief education officer will decide.
So let's talk about what progress was made yesterday. I mean, it seemed that the frustration was building. We know the green shirts came out. That's always kind of the first warning flag. And you attended the meeting. It was almost all day with the education team. What progress have you made on this issue?
Well, if you notice, the shirts are still out, right? You've not put them up yet.
Duly noted.
All right, duly noted indeed.
So, okay, so in terms of the vacation period, we've agreed that the rules will remain as they are right now. And so 132, the entire 132 that speaks to your Christmas break, your Easter break, your summer break will remain. Those won't be changed. So it means that teachers can now be aware that your breaks will be set as per rules, and so then you will clearly know when I must report to work, when I am on vacation, that kind of thing. Schools can better prepare themselves, the school calendar, even though it's the ministry who's going to do that. But that will remain as is. So that's just for the vacation period. No.
So in effect, the agreement yesterday was that proposed amendment has been
taken off the table.
Okay.
Right. So the issue with that too is the fact that we were given the additional week in December, and the ministry is of the view that we must make up the time. We've said to them that we are not in agreement to make up any time. The ministry gave us, and we had to make it clear. Dr. Bobby, you were on the media saying that minister gave the teachers asked, and the minister gave them their wishes. And the minister said he gave us our wishes. So if you gave us those days, why ask us to make up those days back? So what they've said that they will put forth that matter to the joint staff, and the joint staff should be looking at the 180 days and to see where, if any school is short of 180 days, and determine how those will be made up.
By adding on at the end of June, or by cutting down on Easter break? What's proposed?
Yeah.
Well, they've not proposed anything, and we have to wait and see what it is that they will propose, and we have to then ensure that whatever they propose is not going against any of those rules.
Okay. You know, one of the things that I think, because people would say that the teachers union, the BNTU actually get riled up at any for anything that arises in front of them. Teachers union, this teachers union, that. Now, in terms of how decisions are made between the BNTU and the Ministry of Education, what's that process like? Are you guys on the table when decisions are made, or decisions are made and then passed on to you, and you just okay, implement it across? You know, the reason I ask this is because it brings to one's mind that, okay, we're given this, and then we just have to serve that out, while we can come together to stop all this fighting between the ministry and, of course, BNTU. Do we sit at a table and make decisions together?
There are times when we do so, and it is when they think that we should come to the table. So we have not been operating as if though we are true partners. And we've said that to them. Listen, if we are partners, then anything that has to do with education, BNTU is a legal entity that deals with these matters. And so as opposed to inviting all of these other associations who are not responsible for looking after teachers' welfares, you should invite the BNTU because we are the ones who are legally bound to deal with these matters. When it's convenient or when they think that it might be a problem, they would call us to the table, but they will call us to the table to tell us this is what we are planning to do and this is how we will do it, and as if to say, well, you know what, I informed them or I got their consent or that kind of thing, and it's not always that way. So when they come to the table and we disagree with them, then that creates issues because especially if they think that it's an easy sell, and when they come to us, you know, we have issues, then that's what creates these issues again. But as I said before, if it is that the ministry is really serious about inviting us and engaging us as partners to sit around and seriously consider these things, those things would be done from the beginning. Not wait until when teachers get riled up. Because when teachers get this way, it is hard to bring them down back to zero.
Well, and that's what I was trying to understand. You know, yesterday's meeting was an emergency meeting, it seems, and it was all day. It seems there was quite a bit of negotiation taking place. You can tell us what happened behind the scenes if you want. But, you know, where did the breakdown happen? Because you were invited to that first meeting and presented with these amendments to the education rules. We know you did because the union has its own process, which many have said is a bit lengthy, where you go back to your membership to get some kind of consensus. But where did the breakdown happen?
I think in December when we left that meeting, the contention was the matter of the makeup of the time, if I recall correctly, as well as the contract issue. Yeah. I mean, those were the huge issues. And when we left that meeting the day, it was, again, we had to beg for that meeting. It wasn't that we were invited just, you know, your partners come. We had to say to the minister, listen, minister, we are a critical partner and we need to be invited. And no, but the rule said this and the rule said that. But yes, the rule said that, but. And so we were invited. So it wasn't that they really wanted us to be a part of this process. They were going to be abiding by the rules for that one. And then we were invited because we insisted. And I think those were the two sticking points that really, because we did not get the final draft, and so we didn't have a chance to fully review what it would actually be. So our teachers didn't know exactly what we're going to, you know, what would have been in the SI because we didn't get that. So I think that was what really and truly started, you know, or added to the agitation, because teachers were upset from July, August, you know, when these things were happening.
And so let's get the update on that issue, because the contracts has been one that has been on the table for a while, and there's a bit of clarity that many teachers across the country need. What did you agree on, or what progress was made yesterday?
Go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, in relation to the contracts, you will recall that we did not disagree with the contract not having an end date. That it would have been a contract once you've been, you have a full license. We were pushing for the matter of the appointment of the teachers. And so therefore that your license, your contract, which is tied to your license, would not have an end date. Because for a number of issues or concerns arose in terms of having 5 years on a contract to deal with, particularly like, you know, if you want a loan, nobody will give you a loan and say you only have a contract for 5 years. And other things of that nature. Stability of your job. Because
so that was the part that you agreed with, that it was okay to not have an end date.
It's okay to not have an end date. The other issue we had was that the contracts were saying that this contract comes into force at the commencement, which would have been September of 2019. And quite a large number of our teachers have been in employment long before. And if a contract is a legal document, and if we were to end up in court, then they will say, but you just started working 2019. And so we were able to get them to agree. that they have scrapped all of those contracts that exist at this moment. We are still asking them what will be the outcome. In other words, will they return those contracts that have been signed to the teachers? Because we have now agreed that the new the new contract that will come out will have to have in there the service record of that teacher. So if the teacher started in 2000, in 1985, whatever it was, that has to be reflected on this contract. So that has been agreed.
Okay.
We are also saying that when we look at the rules that relates to licensing, we agree that we must maintain our full license
Yes.
by getting certain number of continuous professional development hours over a certain period of time during that 5-year period. But it will not be that when that 5-year period is done, comes to a close, and you would have attained the number of requisite CPD hours that you're going to sign a new contract.
Yeah.
So I think we've made some progress in that regard.
Yeah, yeah.
But in terms of, because you did mention there, Mr. Luke, that following the agreement on the contract, but there is a what if, or what are we going to do then? We're in an election year. Because we are in an election year, things can change, either this way or that way. Was there a timeline given to get some answers?
Well, not necessarily specific timelines, but we know that we have made movement. We are expecting the minutes of those meeting to be submitted to us
today.
by the end of the work day today. And again, if anything goes awry, you will see BNTU out there. You will hear BNTU. I agree with you fully that there is a certain degree, or a great degree of expediency as it relates to yesterday's meeting. But we went in there fully conscious of that we know we will not let down our guard simply because there is an expedient issue for the Minister of Education. And if he or his team believes that they are off the hook by trying to create this or agreeing to these things yesterday, and that after Sunday, depending on the outcome of things, that they will go back on their word.
It will be undone.
We are putting them on alert that we will then have to go back to what our original plan is.
I'm glad you touched on that issue, because I do want to give you the opportunity to respond to people who perhaps look at the movement of the union and say, well, you know, you're just leveraging on the fact that Deputy Prime Minister Faber is up for a leadership convention on Sunday, and it's critical that things are at ease, at least in his ministry. So you leveraged on that to essentially get your way in working out this agreement.
But again, as we've said, that played no role in us wanting to get to resolutions. For him, maybe he feels that, you know, maybe for him that's a plus for him. I don't know how he looks at it. But for us, it's neither here or there. We know that we have been raising these issues from, as I said, from summer, especially the matter of the CPDs. We have been back and forth. We can show you the number of emails that we've sent back and forth with the ministry, raising these concerns from way back then. The ministry could have resolved these matters from September, October. It did not have to come to this. They chose not to. For whatever reason, they chose not to. They have been, you know, moving slowly. But again, if it is that we're in election season, and this season allows any union for that matter, or any group, to be able to make strides in issues that we've been having, then that's good for them. Because at the end of the day, you want to resolve things. But as Luke said, it's not a matter of sitting with us and saying, okay, we agree, and then as the election finished, you turn around, you change your mind. Because that is not going to work. As a matter of fact, our discussions yesterday and our agreements that we made with the ministry have to be taken to our members. And so the various branches must report to their membership as to these are what came out of yesterday's meetings and what are your sentiments, your positions on those. And again, depending on how that goes, there might be satisfaction, and there might not. And if there's not, then there might be for the actions that we need to take as a union.
Now, you see, I think that's where a lot of times there are concerns, again, as I said it earlier, because of how the union functions. But what you have brought to the table, what we're assuming is based on consensus that you've already gotten from your membership. So it means if you have been able to get what you asked for, you go back to your membership, it should be accepted, shouldn't it?
Well, basically, Marlene, we have to understand that, that we're dealing with human beings. The most difficult entity to deal with. But when we go into these negotiations, and like you said earlier, that was a marathon meeting yesterday. We were looking out for the best that we could get for our teachers under the circumstances.
Yeah.
We will never go into our negotiations to have our teachers become the victims of the outcome. So we want to assure our members, of course, there will be those that are not too satisfied. That's obvious, that's a given. But the sentiments was that, listen, we would like our vacation period to remain. The uncertainty of when it would have been was an issue. Yes, quite a number of us are accustomed to the 3 weeks. We're saying, listen, what is your preference? When we looked at what would have happened, do we prefer to know that at least there will be 2 years in a school week in which we would be getting 3 weeks Christmas vacation?
Yeah.
And then at another time it will be for 3 weeks with 3 years in which you would get only 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But
it's predictable.
But you know that your Easter vacation is set. You know that the last Friday in June school must be out. That's the rule.
Yeah.
I think we could get something better than that.
So we covered 2 of the issues, and I wanna quickly tackle the third before we run out of time, just to be able to understand what progress was made yesterday.
But in terms of the second one, though, there was a factor of CPDs that Luke spoke about.
Yeah.
And so the rules are clear, and the rules say that we must have 120 CPD hours within a 5-year period. We have been raising with the ministry that the fact that secondary school teachers specifically are unable or find it difficult to meet the 120 CPD hours within a 5-year period because of the way those things are being offered to them.
Because there aren't enough courses
Correct,
specifically for secondary.
Right. So you have some teachers who might only have 1 workshop in 2-3 years, and so they cannot get 120. So we said, that there has to be a lowering of that threshold of 120. So when we looked at it, we said, okay, the ministry was adamant that it must be 120, and we had to find a common ground that would assist our teachers some way or the other. Our teachers want us to go down to 60 or 80 for the 5-year period. Now, that will take a bit more negotiations, because you can't just sit in a meeting and just say 60, 80. You have to justify
from one
why.
something.
Correct. So we agree that for the secondary school teachers who are having issues, that for this year, those who are renewing 2020 and in 2021 would be, the 120 would be waived. So the primary school teachers, they had theirs waived in the first batch. So then whatever, if you had 100, whatever you had, don't worry about that, you'll get your renewed license. Secondary school teachers are being given 2 more years. So this year and the next year, that they won't have to have any CPD hours.
Or they
don't have to prove that they've reached 120
to get their renewed license.
So they have these 2 years to build up.
And preschool teachers.
Preschool as well, correct. And then in 2022, then it would mean that secondary school teachers and preschool teachers would then be expected to have 100 CPD hours. Now, we're not saying 100 for that 1 year. We're saying from the time you got your license up to 2022, you should have 100 CPD hours. Now, it is not 60, it is not 80. But you got an additional 2 years, plus you were lowered from 120 to 100 in 2022.
So that was a compromise that you worked out there.
A compromise. Now, we will be meeting further with joint staff to look at, and we agreed to a task force actually, made up of the ministry, BNTU, and managements, and probably persons from the institutions who offer workshops, to look at what is being offered, how we can offer more, and have a schedule so that teachers will know by April or so of this year, May the latest, what is going to be offered for the summer, and to see who will benefit and who will not benefit, and how we can fit them in. So it is to ensure that everybody has a level playing field in terms of being able to get. Again, it was clearly put to them that if it is that a teacher does not meet the required CPD hours, because it was not offered for them, the teacher will not be held responsible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there was a bit of clarity that was needed in knowing whether the hours spent in the workshops would count towards CPD hours, how many hours they earn from participating in that workshop. This is what this joint task force will now tackle.
Correct.
Okay.
And so that we can't say that will be done by next week because that will take some time.
Yeah.
So that's why we said earlier that some of these things don't have definitive end date in terms of when we are going to be hearing final resolutions to them.
Okay.
That's clear.
And so the third issue that we're looking at?
That was the emergency hiring.
Yeah.
And so we looked at that because in that we had where there was a clause that spoke to the maximum being 3 months, but for example, for a principal, the management could request that the person be extended to the end of the year, end of the calendar year or school year. And we agreed that it shouldn't only be for principals. You can't have the principals then being able to enjoy this extension and then other teachers who you might not be able to find replacements for them, that those schools will then be suffering because you're just a teacher.
Yes.
And so it was agreed that anybody across the board would be able to have the initially your 3 months, and then you can, depending on situation, you can then apply to get an extension or consideration for a new 3 months depending on the situation. So for example, you have a physics teacher who you're in need of, you can't find anybody to teach physics.
Okay.
What do? You advertise, you interview, you everything, and you can't find a teacher. 3 months is up. What do?
A teacher who meets the requirements as well, yeah.
So then that still remains an emergency because you can't find. We also agreed that there should be a pool of teachers from which the managements can select. And so all of these part-time
so like a
teachers,
reserve list.
correct. And so that was accepted that we have a pool that when you have a teacher that you need, you can go to that pool and do some interviews. Persons from there can apply.
And that, what precipitated that was that a clause in there that said that you would waiver the recruitment and selection process, which then would have left it open for anybody to say, well, we don't have to go through interviews, etc. Come and teach. We are saying no. We know that there are a number of persons out there who would have had some teaching experience. We want you to draw from that pool in the case of an emergency hiring where such persons would exist.
Okay.
And then we also agreed that in the emergency hiring, it would not include when we're on strike. Because
that is a critical point.
That had to be very clear, because if we're on strike, then you could easily bring people in to fill up. And so that
it's intimidation because the teachers will be fearful of
and it could be
losing
union busting as well.
Yes.
So we agree that would not be one of the reasons for an emergency hiring.
Okay.
So
we find another important point is that based on again those conditions under which you would have been allowed to institute the emergency hiring, we were concerned about teachers who would have probably been placed on administrative leave. Right? Administrative leave is for a maximum of 25 days. 20 days in the first instance, an additional 5 days if so required by the management.
Okay.
But what would have contravened that or contradicts that, would have been that the emergency hiring cannot be for less than a month. So if somebody after 10 days of investigating and is on administrative leave and that person is exonerated, then what happens to that person? He or she stays out of the classroom for up to the end of the month, or he or she comes back into the classroom. It was agreed that that person will come back, the substantive post holder comes back into the classroom. And the person would have been hired on the emergency vacancy, then the ministry will have to determine the remuneration for that person.
Okay. But clearly, if you are given that 1 month contract, you have to be paid for the month.
Yeah.
So it could possibly be that since you are being paid, the ministry can say, you know what, remain at that school and help with certain things.
But the person who is returning would take back over the classroom.
Correct.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, before we allow you to leave, there are a few other issues. One, and while you work out all these negotiations, we have stories that come out in our nightly reports that has to do with teachers, and we've not heard anything from you. We had the issue with the teacher, the parent who punched the teacher in the school. We had a recent case in Trial Farm where a teacher was assaulted by a child. And of course, the ongoing issue at Julian Cho. So we have actual issues where teachers are facing challenges. And I want to get what from you, what your involvement is in being able to improve or address what is
yes.
taking place there?
Okay, so in terms of the teacher at Salvation Army, I visited the school the following day.
Okay.
I spoke to the principal. The teacher wasn't in, so I spoke to the principal. She's not a member of the union, and so she didn't come to the union for assistance. Well, she came yesterday, I think, or the day before, and wanted us to work with her. So we are working with her now. You know, she's paid up and everything. So we had put out a press release on that matter as well.
Yes.
And the matter of trial farm, we brought those issues yesterday with the minister, and we made him know clearly that our teachers are now being abused by parents and now by students.
Yeah.
And we will not sit by and tolerate that. Something has to be done to ensure that our teachers are safe on the job. So if schools are not putting things in place, protocols in place to ensure that teachers are safe, then the ministry must deal with those managements. Because managements must ensure that their schools are safe for our students and our teachers.
Yes.
We also raise the matter of children having rights, but they're not being taught their responsibilities, and parents as well. And then teachers have responsibilities, but as if though they have no rights. You can't have one without the next.
Yeah.
If you have rights, you have responsibilities, and vice versa. And so, as I said, we raised that matter, and the minister agreed that it's a matter that we have to look into, and we have to put in place measures. And so the managements then would have to be held accountable to put in place safety measures for our teachers and students.
But it goes beyond safety, though, because in fact, in the current education system, the issue of school counselors in primary schools remains deficient. There's itinerant counselors, one counselor sometimes for a district. And if you are having children at 9, 10 years old acting out in this way, this is beyond just being what we like call a bad picnic or somebody we need discipline. A child at that age doesn't respond typically that way. Have you ever brought issues forward in terms of looking at having school counselors, people who can really help these children deal with whatever they're dealing with at home at the primary school level?
We have.
You see, Marlene, another issue here is that the union doesn't hire, the union doesn't employ. And so when these managements request certain things, they go to the ministry. And if the ministry refuses or finds reason why it cannot be done, usually it is finance, then there's very little we can do. This country will recall that when the same Minister of Education moved the bill and the motion in the House of Representatives to remove corporal punishment from the rules, the BNTU riled up. The BNTU demonstrated at the foot of the National Assembly because we were not in agreement with the removal of corporal punishment from the school rules until there would have been in place the structures and infrastructure to ensure that we would have been able to deal with these type of disciplinary issues that would have arisen, because once you can no longer discipline a child in the manner that would be effective or was effective at the time, although they disputed in the house, big debate about them, they get lashed at school and kill them and all kind of things. You remember that?
Yes.
But we are saying, and the ministry promised, yes, we are going to do something. We are going to have lots of workshops on alternative forms of discipline. They even established a unit headed by Dr. What's her name, Candy? Armstrong. And after a couple of months, end of story.
Yes.
Because up to that point, when that corporal punishment was removed from the rules had provision that it was only the principal who could have administered corporal punishment. So there was something in place. So now you throw that all out. And this is what we're ending up with today.
Yeah.
Right? But again, the matter was brought up, and I know the minister hates to hear about what he did with this corporal punishment thing. He doesn't like to hear that. In fact, yesterday he got, we don't want to hear about that. We will fix it. Again.
But did they give proposals as to how to fix it? Because going backwards is never the ideal. No, it's about finding alternatives and moving forward.
Correct.
Exactly. But you see, and I will end with this. Another thing, when we elect people to government in our country and they become ministers, they become what we call know-it-all, you know. Look here, how you show them the facts. They know it all.
Yeah.
And so that, again, will take a whole new cultural thinking shift in our psyche to be able to deal with some of these things.
Yeah. And we didn't touch the issue of Juliancho Technical.
Well, Juliancho, again, I visited Juliancho, but I was unable to get information, because the day of my visit, the acting principal, I believe, or the administrators were out. And those who were holding over, refused to give any sort of information. It's not that I wanted details as to who got what and that kind of thing. I just wanted to know, how it was affecting. In their view, there was no effect on the school. The school was running as per normal. Things were under control. They were going through with their classes as per normal. Heads of departments were assisting in overseeing the school. So in their view, what was found was not impacting the running of the school in terms of offering students education.
So they're managing fine with an acting principal.
That is what they said to me when I spoke to the two persons who were holding over. So as I said, we have been checking on these things, and we continue to discuss. As I said, we raised the matter of counselors. That is on the table. The Counseling Association has brought that matter up as well, because there are other issues, not just about counselors, but it's about their salaries and how they are going to be recognized, whether they are teachers or counselors, that kind of thing. So out of those, there are several issues that come with counselors that we are working on, along with the other persons who are in the association.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in and providing this update.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate the invitation.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about the Employee Assistance Program available under public service. That's coming up after the break.